when thinking about web archives or web more generally, it is a computational medium to begin with. So why would we need a computational turn for web archives if web archives are already a digital medium to begin with? And why is it then so difficult, if it is a computational medium, to study it with computational methods? And it is difficult to study it with computational methods, as I will soon show. So one of the reasons accounting for this misfit is what Niels so beautifully told us yesterday about the unique characteristics of web archives and them being reborn digital materials with their unique characteristics that address a new kind of literacy, new kinds of skills, and new kinds of methods. And what I'd like to do now is kind of outline the roots of the computational approach in web archive research until today, but just until an hour ago before Anna showed us the way forward. So please keep that in mind. And then propose a very modest proposal for things that we can do as social scientists, historians, people who are not computational scientists, using very simple computational methods. Because one of the problems is that historians and social scientists and new media researchers, they don't know how to approach this. They don't have the tools, they don't have the methods, and they are being deterred by the computational approach, thinking that this is something that is beyond their skills. So the whole idea of this talk is to invite the social scientists to use very simple computational scripts and techniques, not even methods or tools, to expand their analytical toolbox in studying web archives. So traditionally or historically, computational methods have always been there for studying web archives, but that was the realm of information scientists, library scientists, or digital libraries, and they were asking questions about improving the retrieval of web archives and the structure and the persistence of web pages, development, evaluation of retrieval of temporal corpuses. But these were not historical questions or social questions. After 9/11, and this is a quite, it's like with web archives, this is going to be a version of what Anna just said. But around September 11 in 2001, social scientists and political scientists around the world have suddenly begun realizing that the web is harboring so many social and political phenomena worthwhile preserving, and that if we do not do that proactively, it will be lost forever. So Foot and Schneider, with a groundbreaking work on web sphere analysis, have begun collecting the websites around the September 11 attacks in the United States, and created one of the first social sciences related web collection that's still available today, both on the Internet Archive and on the website of the Library of Congress. This is a screenshot from the very old website of the Library of Congress, but still until today, what you can do with this collection is to view the websites or to browse them. You are warned that the collection is 2 megabytes and therefore may take time to fully load. I love that. But until today, this is what you can do with archived collections. Remember Jonathan Goldsmith? You could print the internet, then read it 1 page at a time. So that approach, the single site approach, is something that was put forward by Richard Rogers and colleagues like Anne Elmond and Michael from the Digital Methods Initiative at the University of Amsterdam, who developed a method called a single website biography or historiography. So if web archives are designed to study the history of single web pages, we can do single website historiography at scale. But still we're confined to the limits of the single website. So if the Internet Archive and the so very dear Wayback Machine lets us surf the web as it was, 1 page at a time, are we social scientists and new media historians able to do analysis at scale? So what Niels was saying yesterday, that the visible part of the web is not scalable for analysis, and we need to go to the code to expand our analytical scope. Is there a way to bring this, or to narrow this gap, in a sense, to increase our analytical scale and yet be able to do historical and social sciences related research? So indeed, Anna and Esther Weltefeder were the first, I think, to break through the glass ceiling. No? And Michael. Yeah, in this study, Michael was the first to break the boundaries of the single website. Sorry, Michael, your slide is not here. And then Anna and Esther were also there to try to break through the single site approach by creating historical networks of linked websites from the Internet Archive and other archives. But the questions remain. Are we really able to do significant historical analysis if we have to surf the web one page at a time? Is it possible to break through the single page as a unit of analysis and ask historical and social questions about many websites, a national web, the entire web? Remember the web strata Niels was talking about yesterday. And are there other things that we can do as historians, social scientists, not computer scientists, that we can do with the Wayback Machine to increase our analytical scope? So I have a very modest proposal. It's based on previous research that Adam and I, Adam Amram, who is not here today, unfortunately, did in the past 2 years. And these are basically simple techniques that we used that helped us answer questions that we wanted to ask about the Wayback Machine, assuming a user perspective. Because we could have approached Mark or Jefferson or other people from the Wayback Machine and just give us the data, and then we could assume a data-driven approach. But this approach assumes an end-user approach, and a layperson, anyone interested and confronting the front end of the Wayback Machine and wanting to do more. So these are very simple solutions, let's call them techniques, not even tools, not even methods. The first is designed to increase the scope, finding more URLs in the Wayback Machine by starting with the front end of the Wayback Machine that allows you to begin with one URL. The second is about source critique. We were talking about, yesterday, we were talking about archival literacy. So source critique is something that is very important for contextualizing web archives and learning the larger and wider social contexts. Assessing incompleteness. I think Claude mentioned yesterday that web archives are like Swiss cheese, full with holes. So do we as researchers need more contextualization to understand the incompleteness or the scale of incompleteness of what we're working with? And finally, culturomics, doing histories of non-textual elements, because as Anna said before, web archives are not just text. Niels said that before also yesterday. There are so much more, there are so many things, so many cultural treasures embedded in the source code and in the front end, and perhaps we could use those to do other kinds of histories, cultural histories. So these are very simple proposals, and I'll just go very quickly through them. Each slide has also a URL in case we have an available tool for you to use. Most of the tools are available on GitHub or on our lab's website. And it's not very modest, but I'm going to demonstrate it from papers that we've written in the past. So the first paper that I wrote a couple of years ago began with a very simple question, but not a naive one. And the simple question was, what does the web remember of its deleted past? And why it is not naive? It is not naive because I wanted to make a claim about the preference of the web of sovereign countries and the preservation of memory of sovereignty rather than of countries in transition. And I was specifically referring to one very extreme case of a national web that used to be on the web, but now is completely gone and deleted, which is the national web of the former Yugoslavia. So for me, it was almost like a personal quest to see if I can use the Wayback Machine to reconstruct a national web history of a nation that used to have a web archive, but now because its domain is no longer part of the DNS, nobody can find the URL of a Yugoslav website from which we can enter the Wayback Machine. So it's a very long story, I'll cut it short. I'm telling all this just to explain why we built this method, because eventually we found a Serbian guy active in Wikipedia, and he was so concerned that all of the .u URLs will be broken once the domain is removed. And I emailed him and I asked, maybe you have some Yugoslav URLs? And he said, oh yeah, I just scraped the domain the day before it was deleted. Could you please email those lists? And he did. And so we had an initial seed list of URLs that we knew that were from the historic Yugoslav domain, but we wanted to have all of them. So we built a very simple script that, similar to what the Wayback Machine bots are doing and other web crawlers are doing, just scrolls through the archived pages, looks for other URLs. If they are in the .u domain, they keep it, and then we can increase the scope of analysis. And then from the initial 4,000 URLs, we got to almost 40,000, I think, amounting to unique hosts. I mean, about almost 2 million pages, which are estimated as almost half of what was known as the Yugoslav web when it was live on the live web. And we iterated this method until we didn't find any new URLs, so we're quite sure that we got it all. I also compared it later with figures from the Internet Archive, and that method was fairly robust. So for any of you wanting to increase the scope, the code is available here. Of course, we performed a historical network analysis with the data that we scraped, and then all these URLs that we expanded also lend themselves easily to historical network analysis. As for contextualization and source critique, also from this very study, that guy, the Serbian guy, he didn't just scrape Google the day before the domain was deleted. He also scraped Wikipedia, and we also scraped a former Yugoslav PC magazine called, now I forgot its name, sorry. I guess it's something PC Press, I think it was called. So we scraped that magazine for all the December issue of that magazine. Had the top 50 Yugoslav websites list every year, so we scraped that as well. And then we try to see whether the different sources generate different histories. And what we saw is that indeed the seed list from which your web history begins determines very much the kind of space that you will get from the archive. So if your seed list is derived from search engines, you will get something that is more commercial oriented. If your seed list is based on Wikipedia, you'll get the most diverse set of sources, et cetera, but the point here is that triangulation of the seed list is very crucial to understanding the wider cultural perspectives from which any narrative about web history can begin. A second source critique project that we did, I think Mark mentioned it yesterday, was using the North Korean the archive of North Korean pages on the Internet Archive, using the new provenance data enabled by the new feature of the Wayback Machine, and then mapping the different organizations and collections in which that contributed sources to the Internet Archive. And then we can tell a much more complex story about how the Internet Archive even knows about a specific issue, what are the knowledge processes that generate historical facts that we see as evidence at the front end of the Wayback Machine. Then the third technique is about incompleteness. And here again, we would like to ask the Swiss cheese question. So how do we know that what we have is complete? And here we specify a very simple technique for querying the CDX of the Wayback Machine and comparing the response results for pages that are in the archive and are available for viewing compared to pages that are archived but are not available for viewing, and that gives a wider context to how complete a certain issue is on the Wayback Machine. And I'll skip that. Finally, the cultural bit about the culturomics. We were very much inspired by the work of Lev Manovich, working on large image repositories of Instagram and looking at the cultural patterns of what people prefer or do on social media platforms. And we thought, okay, we have the whole Yugoslav web. Why don't we try to characterize the colors of a national web at scale? So not just one picture, not two pictures, take the whole national domain and characterize its color palette. So we built this very simple script using a k-means clustering, looking for the median color of any folder of images. The tool is available here, and what you see here is our first experiment with the tool. We took all the results, the top 100 results from Google Images. I just queried different types of national foods and got the color palette. And as you can see, food looks like bread in almost every country. So I mean, the very essence of food, I guess, you could see in the similar color palette, despite the, the differences between cultural tastes and foods. But then we did it on the entire Yugoslav web. And here we asked a very nerdy and abstract question, but still I think we were able to do something with it. Like, how similar are the colors of the entire national web to the colors of the flag? So, and whether we could trace some patterns of patriotism or raising sentiments of nationalism by mapping the colors of the national web over time before, during, and after the Kosovo War. There was some similarity, but also a general decrease in the level of the use of the palette of the national flag over time while Yugoslavia was breaking apart. So all of this should be taken with a grain of salt and with so many warnings. Yes, it's possible to use simple computational techniques to expand the analytical scope using the Wayback Machine, but beware of archival artifacts and misinterpretations of historical facts. I just showed you how contingent your narratives could be depending on your seed list. Historical network analysis, that's a topic for another talk, but these networks, as Niels and others have said yesterday, the temporalities of even one generated web page is so mixed. How do you generate a historical network analysis and make true claims about their ontological status in the past? So that's another problem. So beware of archival artifacts. And there are limits to what quantifiable knowledge can contribute to us as social scientists and historians. And as Marta said just before, triangulate your methods. Oral history, material history, as we heard yesterday from Kevin and from Michael, are so important for telling more significant or more crucial narratives. But these methods could be a good starting point for asking questions. These are not the end results. That's my main point. And finally, whatever you do, please assume a critical approach or a self-critical approach or a reflexive approach because of the limits of this kind of methods. So we're trying to break new boundaries, but we have to keep a critical mind, always asking whether we are doing the right thing. So thank you.
Hi, so you were talking about computational techniques for non-computer people. I'm wondering if you can talk about how you think the social scientists and the computer scientists could and should be working together in partnership to accomplish something that's maybe more exactly what the social scientist wants to do, but may not have the skills to do.
I think it's $1 million question. And I think...
Is it just a matter of money, or is it something else?
It's not a matter of money, it's a matter of disciplinary interests and agendas and money and funding. Yes, money too, but for a computer scientist, this is not interesting. because you can develop a new algorithm from it. You don't get, it doesn't bring new knowledge to computers, theoretical knowledge to
Can I ask a
computer
follow-up?
scientists. Excuse me?
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Yes, I just wanted to
Oh,
say
I'm sorry.
that if you can establish this kind of collaboration, as we are doing in our lab, cherish it. So every collaboration where you could find the mutual grounds between computer scientists and social scientists could lead to so much fruitful interaction. It just needs a lot of negotiation and finding mutual interests for that to happen.
So I understand it might not be interesting to the computer scientists in the academic world who are maybe pursuing their own academic interests, but certainly in the commercial world where they're more work for hire and they're being paid for it, I think that might raise their interest a lot, actually.
That's very well, maybe so, yeah. Any questions?
Just like to disagree that computer scientists don't find this interesting.
Okay.
No, I would just support that. I think computer scientists have broader interests than just, you know, my algorithm is cleverer than yours or my program runs faster than yours. There's more to it.
We are underestimated.
So, small question for Anat. Yeah, so, following up on this question and generally this kind of divide between computer people and social science people, do you feel that divide correlates between people who are interested in content and those who are not? And is there a way to kind of overcome that? How do we convince people who deal in numbers that words are interesting? Something like that.
I think the research questions are very different and the research goals are very different. So if your mutual object is a web archive and one of you is interested in questions of retrieval and another of you is interested in the social question, then you need a lot of negotiation to bring these two research interests together. But with enough effort, that's sometimes possible.
Okay, so let's thank again Anat for this great presentation. Now I'd like to invite our next speaker, Quentin Lobbe, from the Telecom Tech, and he's going to talk about introducing web fragments and exploration of web archives beyond the web pages.
And just going back. So, hi everyone. My name is Quentin Lobbe. I'm a PhD student at Telecom Tech under the supervision of Anat, a sociologist, and Pierre Senella, a computer scientist. So, I'm still a child here in this academic world. And thank you so much to Anat for inviting children like me. So, okay, I hope. So, at the end of the 90s, the development of the information and communication technology reshaped the notion of time, space, and border. The rise of the internet, electronic messaging, and mobile phones provide new remote tools of communication and organization to worldwide migrant collectives. By the same time, scientific interest for online representation of diaspora grew rapidly. Out of them, the eDiaspora Atlas, directed by Anat, revealed online diasporic collective of migrant websites. What's a migrant website? A migrant website is a website created or managed by migrants and or that deal with them. We call eDiaspora a directed networks of migrant websites linked by hypertext linked. On the right part of the slide, you can see the Moroccan eDiaspora, the Moroccan network. And the outcome of the eDiaspora Atlas went with a collection of 10,000 migrant websites crawled, categorized, and organized among 30 different eDiaspora. Just have a look at the website if you want to go inside the data. But the eDiaspora Atlas was not only a collection of websites, it was also an archive, a corpus of web archives. Because facing months after months the total or partial disappearance of some of the websites that was collected here, it was decided to start archiving them weekly or monthly from 2010 to 2040, if I remember, and the harvesting of the archive was performed by the INA. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So, just another focus on eDiaspora. And eDiaspora is a map, so it can be read. Here, we can see 3 different clusters. On the right part, we have the cluster of the institutional website created or managed by the Moroccan government. On the top part,
Let me help you. I think we have a point here.
Oh, yeah,
Working?
it's better if I...
Yeah, but it's being recorded, so you should
okay.
keep next to the microphone and point here. I'm sorry to mess up with your show, but
So this is...
this would
Okay.
be better for future access,
So
for memory.
sorry for the camera. So on the top part, we have the website created by the association and NGO who are not linked together. And on the bottom part, left bottom part, we see all the blogs created and managed by Moroccan citizen migrants living or working abroad of Morocco. So we can see all the interaction between the different clusters, and we can also have a focus on some of the interesting websites here. We can have a look at Lobbe.org, one of the most influential blogs by this time, and we can also have a focus on yabilabi.com that can be understood as a hub for the online migrant Moroccan community, as it was an old established forum. But an eDiaspora is a snapshot of a network taken at a specific time, and the web is always evolving. If we have a closer look at the blogosphere in 2008, it was a set of 48 blogs that were alive, and if I go back right now in 2018, we only see that there is only 5 blogs still alive. 23 of them are deserted, which means that they have not been updated since at least 2 years, and 20 of them are totally dead. So we've got a question. What happened to the dead Moroccan blogs? We will try to understand what happened. We hypothesize that the structure of the blogosphere is permeable to the impact of exogenous events or shocks, such as political or social mobilization. We try to discover which one. And to answer to this question, we will conduct an exploration of the eDiaspora corpus of web archives to find the remaining archive traces of the blogs. And to do that, we will build a framework. But before that, I want to make clear that web archives are not direct traces of the web. On the picture here, we can see an empty street with only 2 people in the middle, but in the reality, the street was full of people walking around. But the thing is that the camera only catch what didn't move. These were people didn't move, and the building didn't move. This is the same thing with the archiving. In fact, between 2 crawls, you can miss modification, creation, or deletion of a content. So this is what we call crawl legacy effect, and Anat told about that before. And in the following work, we will try to go under the level of a web page to try to reduce this crawl legacy effect. On this graph, you can see the distribution of all the archive pages of yabilabi.com that we have, the red line, and here the archive are plotted using the download date, the date when the archive was effectively crawled. But now, if we do the same distribution, but using the real edition date of each web page, we see that we have a more historical accuracy distribution. We see that with the crawl in red, there was a hole between 2013 and 2014. We say that just here, please, just here, actually, the crawler stopped to harvest the web by that time. So using the edition date, we are able to fill this hole and also to have access to memories written up to 2003. So what we are going to do is we propose to introduce a new unit of exploration of Web Archive corpora to avoid all kinds of crawl legacy effects and maximize the historical accuracy of an exploration. And we propose to call this unit the web fragment. So considering the web page as the unit of access and consultation of the web built using its own writing modalities and noticing that from the point of view of human perception, a web page is a result of a logical arrangement and distinct semantic component, we define the web fragment as a semantic and syntactic subset of a given web page. A web fragment is a coherent set of textual, visual, or audio content that can be understood on its own. There is a scale relationship between a web page and its fragment. The web fragment can be only pure metadata, a single web element, or the full web page. Then, within the same web page, two web fragments cannot overlap. Then, the web fragment should go with an associated set of extracted meta content. If we can say that there is a title inside, we tag it as a title, an author, or a date, edition date if possible. And then the web fragment should encompass the writing and sharing element used for publishing and sharing its content, like CMS widget, RSS feed, and so on, which means that the way you write or publish something on the internet is as important as what you wrote, in fact. So I will be quick with this technical slide, just to say that using the web fragment, we can improve and reduce crawl blindness by finding always a more accurate edition date than the download date. And we, on the archive of yabilabi.com, the benefit can be a gain of 1,000 of days for the datation of a web page. We can introduce a more permissive archive coherence model based on a specific research question. It's kind of difficult. I will go quick on that. And also importing stuff, we can deduplicate archive content as now our unit is the web fragment. We can find if this fragment did not move in time and avoid to reindex it and to have duplicate content in the search engine by the end. So starting from now, the level of indexation of our exploration will be the web fragment. And what we do is that we extract it on our archive. So just to be quick, we use information extraction methodology, and the web fragment at the end result of the clustering of some HTML nodes. And so we do that for all the archive pages of yabilabi, of the EDI Explorer Moroccan networks, and we built on top of that a search engine. And now let's go back to the blog. So we request our framework for fragments matching HTML nodes that are related to Twitter or Facebook stuff, or for web fragment directly mentioning Facebook, YouTube, or Pinterest. And in fact, that research gave us the first date, the first stamp when someone mentioned Twitter or Facebook in his blog, or when he chose to link his blog to his own Twitter or Facebook account. And starting from that, we see that the blogosphere don't really disappear. It was only some kind of digital mutation from one web territory, the space of the blog, to another web territory, the space of social platforms. And what we found is that many authors kept their pseudonym or a close variation of it from blogs to social platform. They choose to keep their online identity. Other results. So now the online expression of on the blogosphere is fragmented and specialized by type of medium. Someone may choose to write a huge piece of text and put it on Medium, and then use Twitter to promote it to its community and add picture using Instagram and video using YouTube, the author of the past blog not only recreate their network here, they also increase the community structure of it on Twitter, because the graph density of the past blog increase with the graph density of the Twitter network right now. The author also kept their diasporic readers, as we are able to know, for instance, the nationality of the follower of a Facebook page. So here we've got an example with the past blog leilalami.com. We are able to say that Moroccan, American, and Pakistani people are still following her. And then we are also able to say that readers followed the author of the blog on the social platforms. For instance, with Lobbe.org, we found that 600 of the past people who read and comment the blog are now following this guy on Twitter. And these 600 people represent a quarter of the whole comment on the previous blogs. And one of the most interesting clues that we found on the blog is the fact that not so many people wrote a farewell message before shutting down the blog. The only one who did that mentioned the Arab Spring as being one of the elements that give us the idea to go on Twitter, for instance. And in particular, they mentioned the protest of February 20th, 2001, which was a huge protest in Morocco at that time. And this protest seems to have played a key role in this mutation. So we've got now another question. If there have been an impact on this blogosphere here, maybe this protest also impact another part of our network. And so we are going to a second exploration. Now we are going to look at the archive of yabilabi.com. So yabilabi.com, that was the hub, the huge forum I speak before. So we take all the archive pages of yabilabi.com. We request our framework for finding fragments, web fragments that are matching keywords related to the protest. We validate by hand and manually 12 topics, forums topics, matching and that are relating to the protest. These topics consist in 200 messages written by a set of 90 unique users. So here we select then all the topics where at least 2 of those users wrote a message. This results in a network of 300 topics linked by co-contributor. So here on the graph, we can see the evolution of yabilabi.com as a timeline. All the blue lines are in fact the different branch of yabilabi.com stamped in time using the first edition date of each page, if we were able to find it. And the red dots are the topics we selected to build our networks. Then what we do is that for each user, we follow each individual path from one topic to another in time. And then we aggregate all the paths to have a look at the whole network. So what we found is that, please, okay, here we've got what we can call a fixation point in time, where many people start to speak about the protest. The graph can be divided in 2 parts, the post-protest part on the right, the pre-protest part on the left. The pre-protest part on the left is really wide and sparse, and actually what we can say is that 62% of the users, of the people of this network, wrote their first message before the protest. So there were all members that converged at some point to speak about this protest, and the other 40% of the users directly joined the network to speak about this protest. But all of them vanished after 2012. Okay, it's quite the end. So to have a more strong feeling about what happened, we redisplay, this is the same network, but now we don't display it using a timeline. We use a classical graph visualization algorithm, but we still found this kind of longitudinal aspect to our network. And what we do is that we run a clustering algorithm on top of it to have different key moments, and we start to understand by looking at what was written inside what was the subject of each cluster. So at the beginning of the network, people start just talking about daily talks, daily life of the forum, and so on. So cluster number 1, 2, and 3, and with cluster 4, they start to speak about Morocco in comparison to other Maghreb countries, and they start to speak about Moroccan identity. And then suddenly, they start to speak about the protest of February 20th. It wasn't prepared. It's just a sudden spark that fired these networks. Then, with cluster number 6, people debate about the demonstration, about what happened there, and then, with cluster number 7, we see that by that time, the Moroccan government, seeing that there was a wave of protest, they choose to change the constitution to add a democratic improvement inside, and so the people start to speak about that, and then they slowly go back to daily talks. We don't know what happened after. The only thing that we can say is that out of the 90 people that we follow there, 23 of them went to Twitter just after vanishing from the forum. So that leads me to the last point of this presentation. Here, we may have reached one of the limits of Web Archives corpora, and we should consider the idea that Web Archives may be intrinsically incomplete. Web Archive corpora only witness here the first slip of what we can call a pivot moment of the web. What is a pivot moment of the web? In fact, Web Archive corpora still fail to convey the web as an ecosystem. We have separate datasets related to a website, datasets related to social platform, and so on, but not a whole dataset for the whole ecosystem. While we were looking at the archive consequences of the Arab Spring here, web actors were already moving away from forum and blogs. They were already on Twitter and Facebook, so we were missing this point. So in the same way as the long history of writing that was punctuated by key moments, the web and the internet in general already possess their own micro-history. So we maybe can call, and we saw a lot of this pivot moment in the morning, in the presentation in the morning, we can call pivot moment of the web a period of transition between two systems, a moment when new web users fork from established habits and create gaps. A pivot moment arises from three factors: the convergence at a specific moment between a technical leap and user sizing it. Here we witness the transition from Web 2.0 to the web of social platform in the specific context of this Moroccan network and of this time. And so that's it. Thank you so much.
Are you all angry already?
Yeah, wow. But what? No, I mean, wow. But then, what if people don't want you to be bridging that gap?
Why?
What if people don't want? Maybe sometimes there's a gap on purpose.
Oh, I don't know the why, I don't know the purpose. Maybe the following part of this work will be to interview these people one by one, if it's possible, to understand why they choose to move from one territory to another, or why they don't choose to do that. But I don't have the answer to your question regarding this data.
So I see that. I think what I'm asking is a question that's always in the background of these attempts to reconstruct past versions of the internet. That I mean, I can imagine if someone has a pseudonym on a blog and uses the same pseudonym on Twitter, then they're not trying to hide their previous online identity. But I think this case does raise questions about, it just presents technological capacities for reconstructing someone's past in a way that they had no idea that one might be able to do. I mean, I'm not really speaking to your presentation as to thinking about possible implications of this kind of ability that you're demonstrating, which again is wow.
Thank you.
Hey, so yeah, to follow up on this, to put maybe a positive and a negative spin on it, I wonder if it's maybe our job as this sort of like combination of archivists and historians to use this kind of stuff to sort of publicize and document the death of the web, right? So this pivotal moment in the web where, you know, we moved, it's kind of what Anna did with Esther in mapping how blogs, you know, navigated to the platforms, and he kind of got rid of the sort of authentic blogosphere. So maybe that's what the next step is in terms of maybe this gap is something that we should turn into a positive in this sense, and just come up with all these maps that show, you know, the web is dead. I said it was positive and negative.
Yeah.
Small positive.
I have no more insight about that. Sorry.
Yeah, that's not a question.
Okay, so this is a session about computational methods. So I have a geek question, of course, to make, because we have been skipping this. What kind of tools did you use to make this analysis? Were there inner tools? Did you develop tools? Reused? What did you do?
Well, I developed my own tools for this work, but there are all pieces of open source tools that we can use together. The library that do the fragmenting part is just the association of already known information retrieval techniques. I didn't build something new. That's why it's also always complicated to publish on computer scientist stuff, because we don't do something new. We just put together stuff that were already existing. And for the whole processing of the framework, just in terms of technology, we use Spark, Solar, and so on. And I had to recreate my stuff because we were using the DAF format using by the INA, so it was hard to find existing tools on the web to do that. And I also want to have more flexible tools to build my own, to try stuff and to build, to test stuff. So that's why we build our own stuff here.
Thank you. Yeah.
So I would like to congratulate you for groundbreaking work. This is really impressive, and at so many levels, because previously we talked about how difficult it is to bridge between the computational question and the social question. And what you've shown us today is a computational question with a social question, with a media history approach, all bound together in one research project, which is, to me, a very promising venue for future research. I hope also that we'll see more and more in the future. So congratulations to you, and you're not a child. You're
Thank you, Anat.
Okay, so any last question? Yeah.
I wanted to ask if you can connect the information that you gathered here with the questions of what are the main websites that you researched, what are the main topics that interested these people, these immigrants, when they concentrated around these various websites a long time.
Yeah, once again, Cecile.
It's sociological, but it's something that continues from your research.
Yeah. This is the next step of this work. This is also a sociologistic questions. Here, it was only topological interpretation. So the next step will be also to have a look at the textual content or visual content using what Anat did with the flag, for instance. But yeah, we have to look at the content right now to make sure that I didn't say too much wrong stuff today.
So thank you very much once again.
Thank you.